Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Here we are today with Philip Daniel Miles, one of my favorite young astrologers, up and coming. Always
Thank you so
pleasure to
much,
see you.
Anastasia. I'm very grateful for your reception. Lovely to be with you and your fantastic audience. Thank you each for your presence. I'm so excited to explore and share with you guys.
Yeah, awesome. So am I. So we're talking about Saturn today, which is, it is always a pretty heavy kind of subject matter because Saturn, the old guy, he always has quite a few lessons to teach us, right? And it's part of our life here as human beings, right? It's an energy that we just either learn to integrate in ways where we can become the own author of our life, right? It's authority. It's becoming the own author of our life, essentially.
Mm, it's
So
like say that our habitat is because we're within Saturn's space. Like as
yeah,
far as I can see, is like Saturn's realm, and so we're inhibiting Saturn. Isn't that a funny thing? I've never looked at this before. It just came fresh. But it's an inhibitor because we're hibernating within its kiln, if you would say. We're actually, what impression are we getting from being within Saturn? Are we feeling victimized or like we're subjects of Saturn? Or actually, as you said, are we taking this opportunity to find our own authority? Because that's the great thing that we learn through time, and thank goodness they give us the space to do it. Who's they? I don't know. We give ourselves space to do it, I think.
yeah, yeah, and that's really what we're talking about today. The journey of Saturn having been retrograde, for quite some time now, and it goes direct on the 23rd of October, right? So in about 12, 13 days time. So we're gearing up towards that point of,
Yeah, so we could always feel like, well, we can officially say time is ticking now on Saturn's clock until it stations direct, which is incredibly exciting. I don't know about yourself, but I think it's like an 89-degree square to my Venus. And because it's fixed signs, they're the most rigid, bastard, stubborn signs of them all.
yeah,
And Venus is my chart ruler, so it's big change. But I'm excited about it because I feel like this is reframing. Saturn is reframing a lot of perspectives on things, especially as we're currently within a Libra lunar cycle, now waning off the back of a full moon in Cardinal Fire Aries. So it's identification with things. I'm really powerfully riding this particular theme right now, which I'll share with you, is that, of course, it's not a new theme, but it's very clear in my eyes right now that everybody or every interaction, although we get in our own way, we get excited, we get caught up in the moment, we get caught up in the rigmarole of life. But every encounter is an opportunity to see that we are able to be that love in response to these other people which we're meeting. And if we're able to do that, we're able to get beyond division and multiply our consciousness, because if we're seeing ourselves through the eyes of each other, we're actually having compassion for other people. That's what that is. And that's being a joiner, that's being the bridge, that's being Christ conscious, that's being a crystal refracting our vision through each other's eyes. And that's really what I see this Venus journey through the underworld is about, big time. And I think it's brilliant that we have this crescendo moment of Saturn stationing direct and Venus reaching the pits, the bottom of this descent to the underworld. It's like, well, strike me down. You can't take me any lower than this. I've even gifted you my body after getting naked and laying off on my arms. I've not even got a body now. So, I'm empowered to the degree that I see my values and virtues as they are, and there's no taking away or subtracting anymore. It's off to the ascent at that point. And then, but Saturn's actually stationed at this point. What a conundrum! What a moment, actually. I think it's quite clear. It's not a conundrum, which is like a scratch my head moment. It's okay. Well, between as you say now and the 21st, 22nd, it's like 13 days, something like this. just under than that. That wasn't good maths. 11 days. Basically, we've got just over a week to see that there's wet cement in our experience, and there's a few things that we can get a little bit more clear on, alter about on. But really, when it comes down to those moments, as we close out this Libra lunar cycle and Saturn stations direct and Venus in the heart of the underworld, I feel like it's like I'm really got this clarity of where my direction is. There's no shadows of doubts anymore on certain things, whether it's our value, which is eternal and priceless. You and I, we're equal in our value, and everybody watching too. Yeah. Or whether it's what we're here to contribute and how we're excited to deliver that.
Well said, Philip.
Thank you.
One thing that you mentioned about crystallization and crystallization, crystal, Christ, light, right? It just reminds, there's a line here, I just want to read it. The bottom line is, and this is going to sound a little bit out of context, but we can stretch it out a bit. It has to do with Saturn and Uranus, and the bridge, which is Saturn, as it were. Well, it's really Chiron, but Chiron, in order to get to Chiron, we've got to walk through Saturn's world, right? We've got to live through that world. We've got to enter the cave of Chiron and tend to our wounds, rip off those band-aids and feel what is there. And then from there, we open the door to Uranus, as it were, right? Which is our consciousness, essentially. But this particular line is very interesting. The bottom line is that Uranus is forever trying to revolutionize the crystallized structures of the Saturnian reality. Uranus of itself places a premium on individuality, a deconditioned soul that is only defined by its own unique nature. In Buddhist terms, what is called the diamond nature. Now, I really love that particular comment. That's, you could meditate on that for hours, I reckon. There's just so much substance in that, right? That's taken from Jeffrey Wolf Green's work, actually, about Saturn retrograde. And I just wanted to bring that up because you mentioned the word crystallized, you know. So when Saturn goes retrograde, the way I kind of see it is that we have an opportunity to embark on a journey where we sort of detach, as it were, from the external consensus reality, to take that step back, explore the landscape within in terms of our relationship to life and reality, right? And what we have constructed in our life and around us, and how much of that is actually coming from a deeply authentic space within us that enables us to feel that we have our own authority, that we are our own authority, that we have the ability to discern and recognize what we are choosing, you know, as opposed to just being, just following a system, just following a philosophy, just following this, just following that, because it was told to us, and so on and so forth. So that retrograde period is it's like a bit of a dream state where you go into this space inside you and you take a look at the landscapes of everything you've built and created, right? And through that process, you identify how integrated you are with the overall sense of humanity, society, cultural aspects, norms, etc., and where you stand in that, you know, like how much of that has been decided consciously by yourself, or again, you know, how much of that is just a conditioned state relative to the conditions that you were born into, that we were subjected to, that we were told, etc., etc. So there's that. And then the other thing that I wanted to say before we start unpacking this further is that I think it's always worth noticing in traditional astrology, the two malefics are Mars and Saturn, right? And there is a principle where if you are a night birth, Saturn is supposed to be the greater malefic for you, meaning the more difficult planet. And if you are a day birth, Mars is the more difficult planet. And upon viewing many charts over many years, I can say that little principle, that little rule is quite accurate actually. And so I know that you're a night birth. I'm a night birth as well, and Saturn is the greater malefic for me, and it has been one of the most difficult planets to work with, right? One thing that I wanted to ask you actually is that Rob Hand actually says that one of the reasons that Saturn is so difficult for people that are born at night is because Saturn is a day planet. It rules the daytime, right? It rules structure, form, what we can see in the daylight relative to how we are engaging in life and how we are creating in life. Now, if you think about Saturn at night, nighttime is nocturnal, ruled by the moon, right? It has an element to it which connects to mystery. It connects to the feeling realm. It connects to soul, spirit. And it's kind of like a simple example would be if you get up at night, and because I'm a nocturnal person, I can totally relate to this, and perhaps you can. When I get up at night to use the bathroom, I don't need to turn on any lights. I know exactly where everything is. I can walk around in the darkness and know where everything is. That's a nocturnal experience, and being able to be in that space really comfortably. Now, when it comes to Saturn in the nocturnal world, it can't fucking see shit. Saturn needs to see the form and the structure. It needs to have that sense of control. So in the night, Saturn has a great difficulty with the issues of boundaries. So one of the things that Rob Hand says about people born at night and Saturn being their greater malefic is that one of the issues in their life, one of the themes and issues is lack of boundaries, difficult to establish boundaries in life. That includes personally, professionally, on every single level. So I personally can relate to that because I've got a Venus in Pisces as well. She's got no boundaries at all. I've had to really teach her, about boundaries. So
can I interject here? Like an interesting thing which I conclude with this. So I have a nighttime chart with Saturn, and Saturn for me is in my third house in Sagittarius, and it's in one of the oldest parts of the sky, which is kind of the funny thing is it's the 12th house of Capricorn, which Saturn rules. So it's a little bit behind. It's not my 12th house, but it is the 12th house of Capricorn, and I am a Capricorn sun. So I recognize that actually it's the endings for Saturn in this place. It's expanded. This is why the boundaries are bad, as well as it being a nighttime chart. You can see often the same accents of things, often like as you echoes of things through the astrology chart. And so for me, when I'm listening to you about these things, like, okay, well, for instance, it might be that we find things that aren't Saturnian a bit easier, like fumbling around in the dark, like being ambidextrous, like, putting our legs behind our heads, whatever it is, and so, but also coming into structure things. Like I did a webinar yesterday talking about some of these major transits, and if it wasn't for the person which I trust and that helped me organize myself with the Zoom account and the cyclical things, then I wouldn't have been able to bring form to that space. It's the fact that I had this person which I could trust. I mean, I don't like to outsource. I feel that I'm going to learn this, right? But it's like there's some things that maybe timing won't always be great. Maybe it's always about being this, having a less opportunity to say that it's not great. It's just the traditions of the world weren't accepting of this form of Saturn, this different type of framing. And so because the world wasn't open to it, doesn't mean that it's not right. And so maybe we can find that there's another option, there's an alternative. especially for an Aquarian type Saturn, like for this type of thing. It's like a different thing. It's beyond the bounds of what is, you know, tradition, if you will. But maybe we can see that the eyes of tradition, they're open for renormalization in a certain way. Maybe the status quo would be more like that it's not just the outsiders that are alternative. Maybe it can be a bit more like it's okay to be yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just trying to
You're
feel
also speaking of the good context. The thing is that the astrological context, although is always going to be like 12-fold, and so there's always going to be tradition. There's always going to be this conformity, and there's the outsiders. There's always going to be these nocturnal things and they're non-nocturnal things. This is the way that things are.
there's always going to be tradition because Saturn is always going to be there for sure. You know, there's no two ways about that. But really the point that I was trying to make is that for people who are looking at, you know, the journey of Saturn retrograde and then it's stationing direct, you know, so some of the things to consider is, well, first of all, you know, do you have a Saturn retrograde in your chart natally? You know, that's an important thing. Or don't you? Is Saturn angular in your chart? Because if it is angular, there is no question that Saturn is going to be pronounced for better or for worse throughout your life. Angularity 1, 4, 7, 10. The houses 1, 4, 7, 10, just to make that clear for anyone who's listening who might not know what angularity means. When planets are in angular houses, they are amplified. You know, they are completely amplified and energized for better or for worse, regardless of the planet. So Saturn, in traditional terms, is a malefic planet. And even if you don't look at it in traditional terms, it is a malefic planet. It is a difficult planet. You can't make Saturn Jupiter, but of course, Saturn does bring with it the necessary growth, you know, the pain, the growing pains, the karmic lessons, you know, all that sort of stuff, right?
So I would like to interject with regards to these things of interest, and I don't mean to throw spanners in the works and play devil's advocate too much here, but I just want to see, you know, just to play it, to see your opinions and see what happens. And so, like, talking about malefic aspects is a square, an opposition, and a conjunction. A square, an opposition, and a conjunction. And so the opposition is a bit like.
Well, let me just interject there for a moment. A conjunction is not a malefic. A conjunction is the possibility of anything and everything.
Okay.
It contains 360 degrees, which means it can operate in so many ways. First of all, the square in opposition, I wouldn't
the reason why I called it a conjunction, I've got reason. And so I'll say the reason is that I see it's a bit like sex conjunction. Okay, so alchemy, it's the blending of these two. And so you don't know where I'm going to finish and you might end. Because like that's like this ape housey kind of, there's two people, two different points of awareness. And so it's like it takes it being clear in the conversation again, doesn't it? Like for a conjunction and for that energy for alchemy. So it can be malefic, but it can be beneficial. It's transformation, right? Potentially.
Well, again, I wouldn't say that a conjunction is malefic inherent by nature. It's just, once again, it's just, it can operate in any kind of way.
So this is my this point.
Operate like a conjunction, like an opposition, like a square, like a trine, like a sextile, like an inconjunct, like a semi.
This poses my question. This is my point. This is my point. This is my point, and it's constructive and very intriguing and interesting. So the opposition, 180, like a bullseye, is like Libra, and every full moon we have an opposition. It's like Libra, and that's Venetian, and so it's Venus is malefic. Oh, Oh, voila. This is like, it's a Libra is so courteous. They are not malefic, my dear. Actually, it is a malefic energy because it's very reflective. It's very absolute. It's this, that's what this Hall of Mirrors is like. It's a very, very interesting energy, the opposition, isn't it? Because you don't want to give way in a way which compromises the self. You want to be able to be like, here's some equality for you. I'm standing with you. Like, it's either that or it's repulse and it is reject and it is to compromise and to go one's own way, isn't it? That's the Libra energy. And so the opposition is malefic, but it's there to find that equality, that biting point. It's very interesting because you would see that a malefic is straight down the line, isn't it? It's not going to budge. It's like this kind of energy, and I think it's the culmination, isn't it? It's as far as one can grow. Something's got to develop.
It is culmination. It's illumination, actually. Again, I wouldn't call an opposition malefic, but perhaps, you know, the way you interpret that word perhaps is different to the way I interpret it. But I wouldn't call an opposition a malefic.
Just a squares.
Pardon?
Just a square. I thought like I was actually really interested that you brought it up because I've been writing about oppositions and squares as malefic aspects, and obviously a trine and sextile as benefic aspects. But they go both ways, and that was my argument my point I was going to make, is that you can see them both ways every single time, because it can be a challenge, but it can be a beneficial challenge. And so I think as far as you go with an archetype, you come out the other end of it, because all of the archetypes are quite cyclical in themselves. And so obviously we're destroying the text, the logos of astrology in a sense, but also recognizing the depth in it, in seeing these things, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's like with the square, for instance, right? I don't even know if I'd call that a malefic, because here's an example. A square is a conflicting dynamic energy. There's no question about that. It causes you to be really fucking uncomfortable, and therefore it causes you to take action. That's basically what a square does, because of the sheer uncomfortableness about that experience, right?
So the harmonic of a square 90 degrees is the same harmonic as Aries and Mars. That's where I was coming from with regards to the Venus and the Libra and the opposition as well.
Yeah.
In these same sense, because I feel like I get as a Libra person, I get a right joy in seeing these blends and seeing where it seems like, as you agree, you collude. Obviously, it's very obvious, and I'd like to see this diplomacy overlaid for many people who can see the obvious, because it's actually recognizing obviously the aspects are harmonics and signs are harmonics, and so it's all frequency, and we've got all of the frequencies within us. And so obviously we use the astrology as a very practical, the most practical that I've ever encountered tool, a logos, for us to be able to know harmonics. But to bring it into that context also allows us to see that we've got all of them. We've got all of them. We're fully equipped.
We do. Like another example in terms of aspects, and let's just say trines and squares, for instance, right? And I've seen this. If somebody has a lot of squares in their chart, right? Yeah, they will encounter lots of challenges in their life, but they will also accomplish a lot of things and create a lot of things. Somebody who has a lot of trines and has hardly any squares or no squares, I don't know if no squares is possible, but let's just say their chart is just all trines and sextiles kind of thing. Somebody might look at that and think, wow, isn't that person so lucky? And yeah, in some ways they will be lucky, because a trine is being in the right time at the right space and place. That's what a trine aspect is. That's why when somebody says, I had a really lucky moment today, they had a trine aspect. That's what they had. But on the other hand, if you have too many trines and no squares, there's no punch there. You know, it makes people lazy. Trines make people lazy if there's just an overflow of trines and no squares. So squares, you could say that they are malefic in nature to some extent, but at the same time, they produce tremendous results.
So
Tremendous.
you can tell when there's a week, if you actually live in the transits, feeling the flow of just a week go with transits. You can tell, like, if you're really enjoying yourself, you're like taking it a little bit easy, maybe you're reading a bit of your book, might go to the beach, maybe down the gym, whatever, and they're like, oh, now something's changed and I've got to get to the grind, I've got to get to the work, there's things that are getting done, squares are about. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's productive, especially you're fortunate if it gets you into gear, you know, get some traction.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, I've got a Sun square Mars in my chart natally, you know, so that gets me going, you know. It's me doing
Oh, I
what
bet it does. No ants in your pants hanging around with that. I've got my biggest square, I think, that I find my phenomena is Mercury Uranus square Mars, and so I find that sometimes I can get a real big aha real quick ahead of people and ahead of myself. I get ahead of myself. And so, but other times I literally jump the gun and make a fool of myself a little bit. So I learned to double check these things. You might have a great thing, but you need to double check it, maybe 3 times check it. I don't always do that, but like I've learned when it's important that it's worth doing.
That's a really good point, actually, because that's exactly right, especially with Uranus square Mercury. It can be, it's such an amazing aspect. Just
Well, I've got the Mercury Uranus conjunction that they square Mars, so
square Mars,
it's
sorry,
jumping the gun.
right. Well, it's a similar thing with Uranus and Mercury conjunction in that there can be this, you know, incredible, innovative sort of journey of insights, flashes of insights that just come out of nowhere, so to speak, right? And then there can be that sort of jumping the gun a bit, and you sort of need to kind of double check things, as it were, you know, because it can, yeah,
Cement the context.
yeah, more or less what you said, yeah.
Like the fun thing is like the other thing about this Uranian energy where we're talking about, because this is the sign that Saturn is actually retrograde in. So a lot of the things, and it's coming to, this is like, obviously you did a retrograde last year, and this is the culmination. Like it's going to be gone out of there for 28 years by February. And so what we're seeing is that this is all of our work since March 2020, everything that we've contributed, all of the ums and ahs. You gave me lots of ideas. I was listening to you when you were talking. And one of the things that I've been doing is building reputation, not just online, which I've been doing consistently for a longer time. So obviously those contributions are being accounted for, but my main focus have been actually in building reputation here in the local vicinity in Mexico, which is there's that community here who are all contributing in their different ways. And so with the local hotels, I'm also looking to start an astrology group. I've been doing this, but I've been living here for 18 months, which is for, well, a lot of the Saturn in Aquarius, all of it, Saturn's been in Aquarius, but like particularly culminating at this point for many of the things. And so I could see that actually when I first came in, I was being more abiding, you know, of the old traditions, like just being courteous, going around, getting your foot in the door, like this kind of thing. But now I'm like, well, this is me, you know, this is how I do it. This is the way that, you know, it might be a different format to what you might have been expecting, but, you know, so it's funny how the maturer designation of this alternative or this new normal foundation is coming in. Because not only does Saturn be alternative because it's in Aquarius, but Pluto's been in, as you said, Capricorn for a long old time, since 2008. And the old guard, the old tradition, the old way of templating things, whether it's our cosmology, whether it's our body, whether it's astrology, whether it's whatever it is just changing. It's just at the very last culminative point. And it's not just Saturn which culminates its journey in February, but Pluto does, moving on to the very last bit of culmination by March. It's almost like I see that these flag posts are March, when Mars retrograde finishes and Pluto goes into Aquarius for the first time, but it's still not done until the end of 2024. So that's another window of time. This is a shorter window of time that we're stepping into now, long enough for us to get ourselves satiated and saturated within our process. But then as soon as we get to March, it's a whole new frontier of what we're working with.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, Saturn retrograde basically says, I'm not going to do this. I'll do it my own way. Thank you. Right?
Yeah, because the funny thing is and when we're being that courteous and trying to fit the old world, we're not helping anyone. We're not helping them. We're not helping ourselves. So maybe that was useful. We had to get familiar. We had to build a bit of confidence. Had to get our nose about town. You know, whatever we've been doing. We had to get our operating system down. But we've got our own way of formatting and showing ourselves, and that's what's going to stretch and innovate the templates that's asking for change. Whether it's a currency system, for instance, whether it's an education system, whether it's how we format and dignify ourselves with the authority to show up and share our gifts and trades, whatever they are, which there's obviously a whole myriad of gifts and trades, whether we're musicians, artists, maybe we're parents and we like to do parenting in a different way. Maybe it's our garden and our home, which we built and live in a different way that other people do. But it's actually us telling ourselves that we're not going to conform and contort into a rigid pattern that doesn't serve us, so that we're actually finding, say, hey, I'm good enough to be me, and this is what we're practicing right now. Change.
Absolutely. And just on that point, from the point of view of a worldwide collective issue, and I won't talk about this long at all, and I'll be very careful with the words I use as well, just because of censorship, etc. I just want to say that many people were convinced that they needed to insert that liquid into their body, right, in the last 2.5 years with this particular episode of reality that's been playing out. But what I noticed was that since Saturn has been retrograde, there was a lot of people were being pushed, let's say, encouraged, coerced to take number 3, right? To take the number 3. And since Saturn has been retrograde, a lot of people have realized that there's no reason to take number 3. There was probably no reason to take number 1 and number 2. So Saturn retrograde has caused that, because a whole bunch of people went and did it, and then when Saturn went retrograde and they were pushing number 3, a lot of people started scratching their head thinking, hang on a minute, if this is Saturn retrograde, I'm going to fucking think for myself, and I'm going to decide for myself what I really need to do here, what's really right for me. That's just an observation I've made, particularly here in Australia. Okay.
Yeah, I think it might be regional, because obviously it's hard for me to keep up with it. But I think that a lot of people back in the UK might have already had their thirds. My mum, for sure.
A lot of people have here as well, but there's a lot that haven't.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like that there will be more. They've predicted there will be more like scares of why there would be a need for one, and so the manipulation tactics out there and things. And because we had these things, I know like the Queen's death is a major thing, because she was the mint of the coin, and it's like we don't all live under the pound, but the fact that it's all dropping, and it shall all eventually by the end of Pluto and Capricorn has to be done. I think why it'd be lucky if it makes it through this year, these things, and we might be dealing with really having to see the fortune in one another if there was no money, because there'd be no shocks. It would be instant change. Even the power, it would be very big, sudden changes. And that sounds very scary, but the potentials of it is that it brings us together through conflict, through a malefic situation. We can be bountifully pleased through the course of a little bit of time. But like situations like that have to go down at some point or another. They have to happen at some point, whether it's now or further down the line. This Saturn passing through Pisces eventually is the collapse of the systems in between the worlds, and then the rise of a new system. And so this new system is already being cultivated since 2020. This is what we've all, in a sense, been preparing for yonks anyway. Not eons, but you know what I'm saying, a while. And so we're really kind of pleased these things are moving forward, even though there's a few what will seem like catastrophic endings on the external world. There are things that needed to be ended, and yet also I feel that the fabric of that which is ending, the rubble, if you will, the potter's clay, is the same stuff which we utilize to bring an uprising. You know, the demise of what has been is what we will build upon again with so that we can have new things. And I feel like, in a sense, these new things, maybe, as they said, labeled as, you can't do that, that's dirty. Talking about sex, that's rude. Or you're preposterous. Talking about multi-dimensional, you bring me back to diamond. Because Saturn retrograde is rendering diamonds, and only can that happen in multi-dimensional consciousness. That's the funny thing about diamond and crystal, oh so similar. But the point is that if we're making changes, they often happen on the parameter of society. This doesn't have to be a geographical thing. We can see that people walk through different frequencies, but they're all entangled in the same vicinity. The different things going on all the time. Think about the amount of, for instance, drug deals that we don't know are going right on beneath our noses in the middle of the town centre, and all of these different kind of iffy, crooked things that might go on, as well as all these bountifully beautiful things that are going on all the time, which we don't know about as well, right before our noses. I mean, people don't know how often we're going around doing beautiful things, and this we're harping on about it and making a song and dance about it. Sometimes I do. But the point is that we're able to. I got lost. I'm going to stop here.
That was great, actually. That was a really great free-flowing articulation of a number of different things. But within that, it was good. I liked it. That the Saturn moving into Pisces, you know, is a very important part of, you know, the chapters of our life, because, you know, in Aquarius, very loosely, it's been very much about finding our place in the world, right? You know, our place in society, our contribution, who we connect with, who our family tribes are, and things of that nature, right? Friendships, you know, allies, things like that. Where do we fit in all of that, right? That's been a lot of the journey of Saturn in Aquarius, right? And in Pisces, being the last sign of the zodiac, you know, end of the wheel, there's something, you know, very profound that's completing, right? You know, Pisces, endings, completion. It's the end of the wheel. So Saturn's going to be very, very interesting, I think, you know, in the sign of Pisces.
It's like I say Saturn in Pisces is like trying to, it takes a real, it's like the person who managed to put on the Olympics, for instance, as a real Saturnian kind of example. It's like, how can you contain, you got to do the fireworks, got to get the people doing the people control, sniffer dogs, people selling hot dogs. How do you control such a thing? It's a bonanza. It's you know, it's even very hard to conceive. It's like the account of a dream. You can't include all of those details in our account of a dream that we're trying to retell once we're awoken from it. And so it's like really a juggling act, like trying to master blancmange, the ethers. How do you contain it? But the thing is that you're almost meant to surrender to it. When you have hosting a party, you're not going to have a good time. You're trying to contain it. It's going to go a little bit, well, it's going to go like, just have to surrender to have a good time with it. And then maybe it'll be the best thing ever.
That's true. Surrender is definitely the key word with 12th house Pisces, Neptune, always, you know. And I mean, from the point of view of what Saturn represents, we can see why Saturn would struggle, you know, in Pisces, right? It's one rules form, one rules, you know, no form, right? So, and of course, Pisces is unconscious. Well, it connects to the collective unconscious, and including our own individual unconscious.
I also like to say one phrase of it is in between the worlds, like the birth canal between worlds, almost like a sliding chute between different worlds. So it's like, okay, well, there was the time. Do you remember? It was only all of our lives. We had to use those cards and ATMs. I mean, I don't remember many times there was a card. There was actually in my lifetime a time before cards, but I don't remember that because I wasn't an adult.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like we'll be looking back and thinking, well, maybe we won't be using cards by the time that Saturn's on its close out of Pisces. You know, this is a scary thing because actually the worst thing that they could possibly potentially advocate for, let's get back to subject, I've only to bring it around, I wanted to, and that's that Mars, which is going to go retrograde. This is happening after Saturn is stationed direct. This is happening after, only a week after Saturn stationed direct and Venus and Sun conjunction. It's like, whatever happens then, however we're informed, however clear we are, it's almost like something has to happen before that in the world, I feel like. And we've heard, actually, let's just be blunt about it, we've heard that they're doing this threat of nuclear war, and they're doing this currency shift all of a sudden after that. It's almost like they didn't want to sully the Queen's name as that monarch was reigning under that which was going on at that point. But they can get much more stuff done under this king as a malefic situation, if you will. It can be, you can take the rap for these things, if you will. I feel like that. Not that I'm a royalist or flag bearing person. I see that this is all a game of cloak and dagger, if you will. But the point is, Mars will be going retrograde. It's in the sign of the hands. If we're actually going to have a currency shift and they don't want to use coins, they don't want to use paper, and they want to get us on the tech, then there can be like, well, why don't we just Neptunianize you? Firstly, we'll sell it to you with problem action solution with this war, and saying that's going to be very short, but scary enough. But like at the same time, we can say, we'll save you a lot of problem and we'll get you your PlayStation 5s. We'll change the price of things. How about that? It'll be easier for you to get what you want delivered to your home. All you need, glamorous Neptune storytelling, is this chip in your hand. You'll never lose your wallet again. Sell, that's it. That was it. The selling line. I'm never losing my wallet again. I'm in there. Sign me up today. You won't even have to sign for anything anymore. And so that's what it will go every time that they scan your car, like you when you just do in the shop. And obviously that isn't something which I would advocate for. But by March, that might be what's the new normal for things. And that sounds like a terror story, a 1984 story. We can all intend that these things aren't ever going to come into being. But I think that's these invasions of our organic body are only just beginning. And we see this, and I say this under the culmination today of the Saturn-Uranus square on its third quarter closing square. I say culmination, it's not actually an exact perfection, but it's the tightest today, tomorrow, and yesterday that it's going to actually be this year. And then they start to widen.
Saturn square Uranus. It's the last quarter square.
Yes, and it's these days, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, that it's in its closest before the gap starts to widen again.
Yeah.
And there's a lovely punctuation with Pluto having gestation direct, with the full moon in Aries being an ending and a beginning situation. It's like something has to be born out of this pressure, and it's a crystal, isn't it? It's a realization that's being born through us, but also in the world, it's the development of what is an agenda to see that. I feel like, well, it was seeded in the cycle was seeded in Sagittarius, so it's bringing people together, but under one consensual kind of thing, and the transhumanism agenda, so bringing people into a controlled kind of communism where their corporization and state run the show. The new manipulation being science rather than religion these days, and so this is very much something which has even managed to have people awaken out of that kind of hypnotic, all-immersing stance, which we might have been born into. Like, that's poppycock. Can't believe we fell for that for so long, because we've all traveled, a lot of us. We've all gone on the internet and researched, a lot of us. And so we've broken the bounds of these illusions in a lot of ways. But yet there's many family members that we all know that still aren't, that still entrenched in a lot of the old heaviness, which we were witness to having been born into ourselves.
Yeah, I think when Neptune leaves Pisces, you know, the mass hypnosis will take another position, because Neptune in Pisces has literally been mass hypnosis. That's one thing I wanted to say relative to what you said. And in addition, I do feel that we've been invaded long before the things that we are seeing now. It was just a lot more subtle and very Neptune-like, because just even from the simple example of just the rubbish and the toxic shit they've put into the earth and our food and our water, that's been going on for a very, very long time, right?
Well, apparently, as soon as we're going in absolutely deep, and like there's a lot of fish to fry in Neptune. There's a whole kettle of them, and so the tea's been brewing for a while. In fact, apparently, since 1953, World War III has been going on. There's actually classification to say that it was actually silent weapons for soft wars, and the vast majority of it has been done by the Trojan horse, our dear friend, the TV box. And the fun thing about the TV is, I don't know if you remember, but when we was kids at school, what you could do is, if you got a couple of bits of paper and cut them up and you draw a bird on it, one of it's up there, one of it's like this, two pictures, and you'd move it on a bit of string from these two different pictures, and it would jump and it would make the bird look like it was tweeting like this. Do you remember that? Or you get a stick and you twizzle it like this and it would flip between the two pictures.
Yeah.
It's the same as a flip book kind of thing. And this is how TV works. It's just like these different pictures like that. And so, but that's hypnosis. And so even the cinema in my second to birth town, where in the UK, they called the cinema the picture drone. And so it sucks you right in. And the funny thing is, that is only a repeat of how this reality works, because light is beams and waveform like this. And so this is the funny thing. There's two different types of waveform. There's the long wave, which we use on our VCRs, so we can get double the amount of recordings in there. Or there's the short wave, which was like a little bit less, but it's more direct, maybe a better quality recording, wouldn't it be? You'd think? Especially if you're recording like in a sound recording studio, you want to use that shortwave. I think that it's better recording, but that's an absolute direct connection shortwave. It's like you're re-recording over things and you want to get ultimate clarity. But if you're just going around in long waves, you're just going around watching the show take place. You're not actually improvising, if you will. You're not actually playing a role. You're not a stand-up character. You're just going along with the trends. You're just basically being funneled along with whatever you're told to do, if you will. So I think that this is very interesting, consciousness. I'll get lost in it talking about it though, because it's so hypnotic in itself. So the TV box, the Trojan horse, that manipulation tool, 1953, we've been told a long time before we had the opportunity to say that conspiracies were a thing, that there was such a thing as controlling the masses. But it's a bit like, I feel like this reality can be perceived in that consciousness that is victim, like that, or we can see that actually these collective challenges are obstacles for our ascension. I say that if we came into this experience and signed ourselves up to the challenge of unawareness and forgetting that we are whole and we are creation, then we do it so that we can then find our power and ascend into our creativity, rather than feel victimized, like Chiron, stuck, apprehended. We're like saying, okay, well, I might have this situation, but at the same time, I find medicine in doing this. I find charm in doing that. I find grace in being with this situation, that I am able to find my empowerment within. And I feel like this is a very interesting time of that. So, okay, well, I don't have to control the world, but I'm happy to be a part of this dynamic within the progress of this situation, or this section of my arena, if you will. Like
absolutely. And I mean, no one can control the world. in
But
reality.
we can control the story we tell about our experience of it.
Well, that's our own decision, you know, what we I mean, I sort of see control as
That comes from fear, doesn't it? Like, oh, I've got to control it. Oh no.
it's a personality thing and a Saturn thing, and can be a Pluto Scorpio thing as well, for sure.
Yeah, we all get in it. Like, I mean, like sometimes I get embarrassed that I just caught myself trying to control a situation. And then sometimes you, like, for instance, like sometimes, like I'll just give you an example. This is a good example, a very transparent example. I had a really great client this afternoon, huh? And for me, I like to show up and I like to provide a great service and being able to go through all of the planets and talk about the houses that they're rule and just do a good overlay. This is my intent. And I know in the time that we will get that done. But sometimes the clients like to, like, normally I'm not, sometimes like clients like to converse in different ways. You go over the flow and you like to answer questions. But then I'm thinking, I get to little bits concerned that, oh, time's ticking. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get all of the way that I like to do it in. But then I remind myself that it's not for me to control the situation. It's for me to ensure that my client is enjoying their experience, regardless of my need to control the template. So consciously, I recognize that I'm learning through the experience of holding my consultation, you know, and I don't need to control the format. It's about the overall what's received, the value of what's received is the most important thing. It's not the fact that I might have got in every single planet. I did mention I'm a bit concerned we might not do that, and I feel like this conversation is what you're here for right now. You want to have this conversation because this is the conversation that's being explored. So I'm here for that. I'm here for your presence, and so that's the way we did it. We kind of met in the middle, I guess. But yeah, that's like where we're at this challenging time with Saturn Uranus. That how we don't want to completely lose ourselves to the conformist reality, because then we might be so off piece that we're unrelatable entirely. But at the same time, we'd like our innovations to fit into the society or to be recognized by the collective. So it's a biting point thing. It's the middle road kind of thing. How do you feel about it? But some things aren't middle road. Some things are absolutely no, aren't they? And they have to be. And that's the absolute about them. So that some things are, I'm completely with the Uranus. Some things are, I'm completely with the Saturn. Some things I'm down the middle here. That's my analysis of some of these experiences. And it's all a personal truth choice, isn't it?
It is, and you know, for some people, the validation or recognition is really important in who they are and what they represent in this world and in this life. And for others, it's, you know, not such a big deal. They're quite happy to be a hermit and be hidden away like Vulcan. Do you know who Vulcan is in astrology?
I'm familiar that the Vulcan energy through Spock in Star Trek, and also a punk rock song called Vulcan Eyebrows, Vulcan Ears, No More Sorrow, No More Tears is the lyric. And so it's about this kind of solemn stoicism that one can have, not because one doesn't feel, but because it keeps one safe from feeling too much, potentially.
Interesting point. From my understanding, Vulcan is a very profound archetype in esoteric astrology, right? Not a lot of people know about it or use it in their astrology or whatever. But, and it's always conjunct the sun for everyone, right? But anyway, in myth, the reason I say that some people are very Vulcan-like, Vulcan worked in a dungeon. Nobody saw what he did, right? But he was this genius in alchemical transformative work. Everything he did, he just had this alchemical, incredible ability to transform things, right? In huge ways. He did the most amazing work, but he never got any recognition, any acknowledgement, any validation. And in part, he wasn't looking for that. He didn't need it. That's why he remained hidden. He was actually Venus's lover as well at one point.
Lucky
And,
man.
pardon?
What a lucky man.
Yeah.
The funny thing about Vulcan is that, well, also that you mention it, as we're both lunar night charts, but also like, so the bit of information I have to share about it is it's almost like the metamorphosis of some manifestation that hasn't yet taken form. When you see Vulcan, it's almost like the inclination of intuitive idea that we can be the conduit for, which is, I've got it, as we say, it's always within about 7 degrees of the sun, something like this. So I've got it just 2 degrees away from my sun, 0 degrees of Capricorn. And so that's all the information I have on it. But I like that actually, in knowing that it's that idea, that profitable, I can actually bring something into the awareness, but you actually do have to work for it. You do have to then bring it into the Saturn. You do have to, it's not just the idea that comes without actually the work or the elbow grease that you have to put into it as well.
It's the work that you do on the soul. That's what it is. It's very deep, private, inner work. It's the work that you do on yourself without it being shared or shown to anybody. It's your private, personal
Would
thing.
you say that the relationship with the sun then, like it can be a lot with personal will? You know, because it's like the sun is a lot like my drive to do it. But it's like, you know, oh, I love doing this, astrology, talking with you and having clients and exploring and making videos. I've got so much will. I'll get up at 6 in the morning, I'll stay up all night and do these things because I love it. And that's like, but there was times when there wasn't that thing I loved. There was like, you know, before 12 years ago kind of thing, I wasn't doing this then. And so the will to do things feels great. That's work on the soul for sure.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah,
I like it.
Mm. So
if we go back to the like maybe some of the things we've unpacked, we can come back and round and then come back to some, explore a little bit more about the conjunction as well. So with the Saturn, I really want to go back to something you addressed and just readdress it and pack it away. And that is that what you said about the suggestibility into certain things that we might not choose to keep our body the way they are. And I think that we relate this with the Jupiter as well, because obviously all these things aren't standalone, they're multifaceted. So Jupiter's going back into Pisces, and it's going to be within 6 or 7 degrees of Neptune, where they had their conjunction. Was it in May or June? Something like that. I think it was in May.
April.
Late
April. Yeah.
240, right? Years, something like that, or 140 years since around that kind of time. And so it was quite a rare thing, and it's something that when you're within the midst of it, you can't quite see or perceive it. It's a good word, right? Because it's like a myth. It's a mystery, and so basically it's my story, but I can't see it because I'm right in the middle of it, and so, you know, there's a hazing going on. We're learning about ourselves real slowly, and through it's spellbound. And so the thing is that now that there will be this second opportunity to see what we're immersed within, we might be like, oh, I see. And it's a bit of a real bitter pill to swallow for people, because actually it becomes actually quite a compassionate emotional conflict. Not only because it's not a joke, it ain't funny, as much as we see some memes about it and we can laugh and chuckle at some memes every now and again, because actually sometimes you just gotta laugh even at a fucking funeral. Thank goodness we do. And so because it breaks it down, even humor is part of the things that actually helps things break down into more tolerable. So basically, with regards to this two fish of Pisces, one's swimming one way and one's going the other way. And it might be the challenge that people just can't see eye to eye on same subject matters, or it could be that people have already done something and now they wish they could turn around, but they've got to deal with the oil spill. The funny thing is, oh yeah, because I see it like an oil spill on the beach of humanity. The funny thing is, I haven't done that myself. I'll be blunt. I haven't done it, but like I have been on the old Ventolin inhalers since I was a baby, which is sterilization. I have had pharmaceuticals, which is not ideal. I think many, you're very fortunate if you haven't, and if you have already been clearing up your body, you're ahead of the game. And the thing is that we all have a lot of clearing to do, which could, in 7 years, to clear out everything in the body. And that's to say that you know, didn't go and have some kind of Coca-Cola or something in that whole 7 years. It's like be real clean about things, to be absolute. And so I think that we've all got a massive cleanup job, so we can have the compassion. You know, I haven't drunk alcohol for almost 4 years, but there's still things that I do. Like I did have cheese at some point within the past 48 hours, I'm sure. That's not to say I'm a bad man. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I don't think anybody are bad just because we've been lured into things that might not be necessarily best for our body. But what we can do is respond to them with the best information that we're coming through. And so this means that you do if you have had a vaccine, basically, and you're now awakening to the fact that it might not have been a choice which you wanted to go with, there are protocols and procedures where you can try and minimize the damage and try and purify and clear. If that's not something that you're interested in, then that's a choice that you've made. Very smart. But the thing is, if we're dealing with it, it's like the challenge is compassion, isn't it?
It's always compassion, you know, regardless of the storyline that's being played. You know, the ability to be compassionate towards yourself and others is, you know, such a gracious space to hold, you know, for yourself or for others, regardless of the storyline, you know. And yes, there will be some people that completely regret it, but that will never admit that. There will be others that still stand with, you know, that storyline, and then there'll be many others that are just completely liberated from it.
Let's talk about it from a very interesting angle of trauma. Like somebody, like if you talk about sexual abuse, for just in a sense, sometimes there's something that doesn't get spoken about very often. It's taboo because of the shame. And so when it comes down to being misled by like the government, for instance, with a vaccine, there's a lot of shame that comes with it. So that's why people will, you know, they'll go along with thinking it was a good idea because of this. A bit like how someone would have mentioned that they might have been abused in a way. There's no shame in being abused. There's no shame in being misled. But one can learn a lot from humbling and opening with regards to being misled by a situation that has the government, you know, with regards to these situations, which is, as we say, it's unheard of, isn't it? What we're living through. This is a whole new layer, but it's actually more obvious because these things have been happening before, but concealed to our awareness previous to this, like with the TV, like with the pharmaceuticals. This is like, oh, we're doing it in front of your noses now so that you can choose to call us out. It's true, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, totally. Totally.
And so it's the final straw. Like I feel like actually, if there was any more silly business, like if they want to do more, if they want to do more vaccines, it's like, okay, well now it's like I'm absolutely within my truth, and I'm absolutely meeting tribe. I'm building a yoga, nutrition, astrology school. That's my intention. I want to connect with people. I want to do these things, even if it means being able to also dance and go into the city every now and again, like a Robin Hood, make some money and come and contribute it to this lovely school of astrology, nutrition, and yoga. This is what I'll be doing. And so this, I feel like we've been primed and tested for these things, and it's just about standing in our absolute truth, watching the old world crumble, seeing that we are supported by, and our faith will be restored again and again and again as we see things crumble before ourselves, and yet we stand. And that's just these next few years. Should we dial it right back into now, though? For goodness sake, we've just had a very interesting moon waning into Taurus, Venus ruled sign. Venus is actually opposite Chiron, and Mercury's gone into Libra, where Venus is with the Sun. Venus is still trudging down to the underworld on the descent, but Mercury will, in a couple of days, oppose Jupiter for a third time, still working through its shadow. Before we know it, Mercury will also be concealed by the beams of the Sun, but not quite yet. So the fun thing is that before we get to Saturn station direct, is the few more aspects. Like we're going to have this Sun, which is already building to trine Saturn, and Venus will as well. Do you want to bring it up on the screen?
Yeah, I'll do that just to kind of enable people to. How do I? There's a
That's
way.
me. That's all right. This is my chart.
I'll leave it there.
Talk about it for me. Look at my Vulcan down the bottom at 0 degrees.
Sorry, Philip. Do you want me to?
That's all right. We can, you can share a bit of it, and we can make a point of it now. Now we shared it. I don't mind. So it's funny because we just had the full moon on my north node over here, and also we just spoke about that Vulcan, which I don't always look at. What I found most intriguing, instantly intriguing when I realized that we were looking at my chart, is that I don't often have this asteroid on my screen. What can you tell me about it? It's a Hygeia.
Oh, Hygeia.
Yeah. And Mars is conjunct this today, and I've got, as we can see, Mercury Uranus opposite. And so I was wondering, what's this Mars transit going to be? Because it's going to be slowing down retrograde. This is not what we're here to talk about, but it's going to be there for a while, but it's going to pluck this bit a few times. So I just wondered, because of the Mercury Uranus, but Hygeia's there as well. What's that mean? Anything to share on it, please?
Well, Hygeia is the daughter of Asclepios, who is the god of medicine. So she's the goddess of health and hygiene, right? And she's actually very prominent in your chart because she's conjunct Chiron, another healer. She's a healer as well, and he's a healer. And so matters of healing and health in the various ways that is important to you based on your life journey is significant from the point of view of what this goddess represents, and also learning the wisdom of health and learning the wisdom of wholeness, learning the wisdom of philosophy. There is meaning for you when you understand the matters of health and healing, right?
Yeah, I think basically the past 12 years, I've been on this real cosmic journey. It's not really been in the body, but now I'm recognizing I just had a Jupiter return, as you see. I've got Jupiter in Pisces, and so that was only in February. And now in this next year, 12-year journey, not only would like to make, as we said, just mentioned, astrology, nutrition, yoga school, and make some greater documentaries about astrology, like cinematography, contributions of books and things like that. Basically, contributions of media which have got greater longevity. But this health thing, this really learning about Ayurveda practice, alchemy of the body, the garden and herbology, this is something which I'm actually finding that's almost a necessity for me to take an interest in, and will be a great wealth to be able to be immersed within and share, and then connect it to astrology. And obviously, because it's already connected to astrology.
Exactly. And that's what you'll do, because she's in the 9th house, the house of astrology,
I'm really excited about it. It's going to be, it's just a missing piece to my puzzle. And so it's going to be allowing me to personally flourish, because my body is going to be only getting healthier and healthier. But also to share that with people is going to be just really enthralling, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's in Gemini, so it's all about the learning process, of what it means to feel healthy, what it means to be healthy, what is healthy for you. It's the investigation in all the different levels of information that you can find that supports your journey through that. That's what you're doing with it, essentially.
Exactly. Also, it's funny that you brought this up, the chart, because Venus is right on my ascendant today, and the Sun's on my South Node. So it's almost a bit like highlighting me there for a moment. But I am bashful, the Venetian. So we don't have to go a whole case study on me, but thank you for that anecdote on this particular bit. I think that's very intriguing and food for thought.
Okay, I'll just bring up a chart for the moment so that we can just
It's always interesting to see astrologers' things. I've also got a transit of Lilith at the moment, and 19 degrees it is. And so I think we've all got that in Cancer. So, but this is interesting. This is what we're here to talk about, right?
right. So there's Saturn, Mars.
So,
Sorry, what was that?
the was it May that Saturn station retrograde? But it was all. But when did it enter its shadow? That's interesting.
I'd have to go back and have a look at that.
I think it was something as early as actually February, really early.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top.
I think it was something like middle of February. So this means that anything that we might have taken on and put on the shelf, like I'll do that, like and didn't finish off. Maybe the retrograde wasn't about recognizing that we were going to come back and finish it off, but we might do that. I've got a guitar set behind me. I haven't played it for a few months. I'd love to pick that back up. But like space needs to be made for that, doesn't it? One of the greatest things I've learned about Saturn is that things don't function in the real physical world unless you create a space for it. It's like a flower box. You need to put create the box, otherwise there's no flowers going to grow. No matter how much you love flowers, no matter how much dirt and seeds you've got, if you don't have the box built, nothing's happening.
Yeah, so it's the form that supports, right? Whatever you want to put into that box space, which is Saturn, of course. Yeah. So, yeah. But again, I just want to mention to people, if you have a Saturn, a position of Saturn angular house in your natal chart, so 1, 4, 7, and 10, Saturn is a pretty powerful planet, for better or for worse. At different times, sometimes it'll be producing beneficial sort of accomplishments and results for you, and at other times it will be quite difficult. There's no question about that. So Saturn retrograde and direct periods, whatever's going on with Saturn is going to really stand out for you, is what I'm getting at when you've got an angular Saturn. Not that it doesn't stand out when it's not angular, but there's something very different about angular houses. And I mean, and I've said this before, the easiest way to understand why angularity is so powerful, it's houses 1, 4, 7, and 10, which are the pillars that underpin your whole life. It's relationships, it's the foundation in which you stand on, live in, home, life, and it's your persona out there in the world, professionally and so forth, right? So it's the whole kind of person, if you like. It's the 4 pillars that hold the structure to our life, Saturn, right? So those houses have a lot of power for that reason, for instance. So furthermore, if you're a night birth, just to remind people again, Saturn is said to be the more difficult planet. So therefore, when Saturn does go retrograde and you are a night birth, it's a pretty big deal. It's something that really stirs some things up. It brings things up to the surface. It brings things up to your consciousness, to your attention. And sometimes it can feel like you are boxed and cornered into a situation where you really have to make a decision about something, right? And so the interesting thing about that kind of journey is that it's like Saturn is proposing you the gift, which doesn't seem like a gift because Venus rules gifts, not Saturn, but let's just say it gives you a lesson of some sort that says, okay, in this situation where you feel kind of boxed and cornered, what is it that you might be able to do, and how you might be able to do that enables you to feel that you are the decider, that you've become the author of that storyline.
I've got
instead.
an example. Good example.
You've
So
always got an example. Go on.
yeah, so like we might think that actually we don't have, as you say, the authority. We've got this deadline. We've got this limited resource, in a sense, potentially. We think or feel like that's the case. But if we recognize that we can make the most of what we've got with this low-hanging fruit, and maybe in a sense state our authority, say, hey, I'm here, a bit like sometimes if there's a squeeze in a crowd, you're like, I'm here, you know, I need some space, I'm right here, you know, whatever's going on, you know. And so you take command, and then you're just like, no, I just need a little bit of space so I can breathe. And so basically, and in doing that, what happens is then we can demonstrate that we are able to own it. We are able to be within that space and churn out a result. You know what I mean here? And so it's being able to not be reprimanded, but being within our own command rather than it having taken from us, as you said.
Mm, mm. So, with that in mind, I guess it comes down to my understanding and experience through life, and I've been on this planet for a few years now. Saturn always kind of wants us to. It's really, and this sounds so cliche, but it really is it. It's really about taking complete responsibility for your life, and then when you do, um, nobody else can dictate to you anymore. It's game over.
That's what I kind of meant to say. I got a little lost. So like it's like if you feel like you've got the time to make it work, you need to demonstrate it, and that's the tough. That, as you say, like it doesn't feel like a gift,
No.
but it is, because
It
you're recognizing I am able to do this. I can take care of myself. I don't need to use the stabilizers on my bicycle anymore, is what it's really showing. I might have used this old format and it taught me how to do things, but I don't have to do it like that.
definitely. And also, I might add to that that people who are born with Saturn retrograde tend to be people who, and this is a generalization, but it is an observation of mine. People who have Saturn retrograde are less likely to struggle with figures of authority come up against them. You know, police, government, law, whatever it is, systems. You know, etc., etc. They just they don't come up against it so much because Saturn retrograde is working for a lot of people out of a non-consensus sort of state, you know, that it's just more kind of like a Uranus sort of energy, as it were. But Saturn direct is still dealing very much with the status quo right in front of your face, right? And your growth and navigation around that, in that, towards that, and then ultimately kind of away from it as well, you know. So people who have Saturn retrograde natally might be more at ease actually with Saturn going retrograde, perhaps not faced as much with dilemmas of personal self-authority, and therefore not being thrown a lot of curveballs on their path that will ultimately say, okay, here's your chance to actually get it together, make the decision yourself, take responsibility for this, and then you're free of that Saturn restriction. You know, it's game over for Saturn once you internalize it, is what I'm trying to say, right? So those are some of the things that perhaps people listening on your channel and on mine, they could give us some feedback if they are a night birth.
So I heard you say something there, and that was interesting. I just want you to say that one more time. So once you internalize it, it's game over for Saturn, right?
Yeah.
And it's a bit like metaphysically. If we see somebody else as something externally and nothing a part of us, division from us, but then it's like pop goes the weasel. Actually, they're my reflection, and there's compassion, like what we said earlier. We multiply on consciousness. So the same thing with Saturn. If we see it as this challenge or this obstacle, like it's rejecting, repulsive of it. But then when we internalize it and say, aha, I am able to be this Saturn, I am able to be my own role model, my own leader, my own command, my own authority, then it doesn't make it a challenge. It makes it something which we've embarked upon and are embodying.
Yeah, because we don't project it anymore once we've internalized it and integrated it. Integration is probably a better word than internalization. The internalization process is more fitting for the retrograde journey. That's what we do with it.
So
But
now we're summarizing, I guess, then, like, so it might have been for like the past 5 months to be like, okay, how the flip do I do this? How do I support myself in this way?
yeah,
And yet now we're finding we've done it. It's actually something we've pretty much like, we're coming along now, you know, it's functioning.
yeah, yeah.
Thank goodness.
For me personally, I'm not going to go into the specifics, but there were certain circumstances where, and look, Saturn for me is angular in my birth chart when I was born, so it's a very powerful planet. It's also square my nodes. Now, the last, 2 years or less than that, it's been over my ascendant, over my moon, through my first house. So naturally, this Saturn in Aquarius has been a really big deal for me because I've got an Aquarius moon, Aquarius ascendant, so it's hitting off all of that stuff. It's angular in my natal birth chart. So Saturn transits are huge for me. They bring about very big situations that are very, very difficult and very challenging to deal with. And I just basically have to deal with them, right, to my best capability. And this time around, I was confronted with some circumstances that were far from ideal. And I had two very specific choices. And I mean, I probably had multiple choices, but really when you bring it to the crux of things, I had a choice to either acknowledge and accept and surrender to a situation that was far from ideal. That was a big thing. It was a really big thing, not a minor thing, right? So I had a choice to accept that, and make a particular decision subsequently that ultimately freed me, liberated me, and closed that chapter with the surrender and acceptance in play. Or I could have resisted and had the attitude of, fuck this, I don't accept this shit. No, I'm not going to follow up on this subsequently, blah, 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 blah. That would have been resisting what Saturn was asking me to do in that situation. So, fortunately, because I have grown through life and experiences and so forth, I opted for the choice that if somebody was observing it as an outsider and they didn't know me and didn't know the ins and outs of that whole situation and what it meant to me, they might think, you conformed to something, where you could have just told them to go get fucked, basically, because some people would have. So that was a big chapter for me in the last couple of years, really.
And we know when we have, don't we? Like when we conform to something that I didn't want to be doing that. We know, it's like, oh God, I've just agreed to go meet these guys for coffee. Oh, I didn't want to be going doing that. But sometimes it's more serious, and we're like, shit, I've got to pull out. Like I ain't doing that. And so, but some things are an absolute no in the first place. So we know what our authority lays. It's at our root chakra, but it's a definite yes or a definite no. Because some things we ain't going to bother dilly-dallying around pretending to say yes and be courteous about when they're absolute no's from the get-go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, with the very brief, undetailed example that I gave of my experience with Saturn being retrograde and the opportunity, it actually was an opportunity for me to make a decision based on my own authority, right? Because I had different opinions from people around me, different perspectives, and I heard everybody, I listened to it, and then I made my own decision. And that was me being Saturn in the first house, because a planet that moves through your first house, that's you being that planet, literally. And that's what I had to do instead of projecting it, right? So, any of you out there with transiting Saturn in your first house, I'd love to hear what your stories have been while Saturn's been moving through your first. Doesn't necessarily have to be a really difficult time. It can be, but it will make you feel a little bit older. I have to say that it's made me feel a little bit older in certain ways. And that's not really the nicest feeling necessarily, but that's the psychological trip that Saturn kind of plays with you as well. Saturn plays a lot of psychological games with us.
The heaviness of the Saturn, it's a lead weight. That's like, in a sense, that the body can feel heavy when we're like dealing with certain things like which are chronic in time. Like, I know I've had a lot of eczema and hard work, especially in like winter in England, and so it takes a lot of speaking oneself out of it, trying to turn the other cheek out of it, and that's heavy weight, like carrying an old albatross. But these are phases of time, aren't they? Sometimes that they Saturn changes sign, and thank goodness we have a different expression of it and different exception of it.
Yeah.
I'm not showing off. I've got Mercury, Venus, and the Sun through my first house, but not for much longer. They won't be there for long.
That's okay. I've got the Lord of my soul, Pluto, coming to my ascendant. So if I'm still alive when he gets to my ascendant, then sweeter times ahead in many, many ways,
Yeah, well, what would you like to use the Pisces transit for? Like, you see, like, how do you get? The only way I get through things that I don't necessarily am not enjoying is, or if I see, even if the things I do enjoy, I like to put a dangled carrot at the end of the day. I've actually got a dangled carrot for after we're done, even though I'm enjoying it. Like, of course, I'm enjoying talking to you, but my dangled carrot is I got a couple of croquettes with Chipotle sauce, which I'm going to heat up and have a late night treat. Just 2 croquettes, they're not too big, but with a little bit of Chipotle sauce, there'd be a yummy little treat for me. So for myself, that's my dangled carrot. And so, but like Pisces, it can be like a plan for what you might do with Saturn in Pisces could be your dangled carrot for this transit.
Well, it's going to be in my second house, and so I've been reflecting a lot on that and what the implications are, So without going into the delineation of Saturn in Pisces in the second, because the video is not really about that, and many people would know anyway to an extent.
I've got an assumption projection.
Go on then, do it.
I think it's the power and authority in your voice and sharing what you actually have to share. And it might not be that actually you're aware of how broad you're going to be received by that time, even though that's only 6 months down the line. I feel like audiences can widen and broaden in a powerful way between now and then. I say that because of the Pluto going into your first house as well, and I feel like it's going to be a big time for change in these types of areas, and we shall see.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a lovely projection. Very, very much appreciated. Absolutely. Yeah, look, I've got very strong feelings of what I'm going to be doing with Saturn through the second, but I just don't want to talk about it right now publicly. But yeah, I was a little bit kind of like, oh God, I've got to go through Saturn in my second house now. I've just fucking been through it in my first, really. And then I just thought, no, I've got to change my fucking attitude about that and actually work with it in such a way, because of the incredible integration of it the last like 2 years and what I've endured and what I've had to decide and surrender to and integrate and so forth. I thought to myself, there's just think about that. Think about the strength that's come out of those experiences and pour that into the second house now to really start building another new block. Because when Saturn came over my ascendant, which it may have for many people who are listening, it's a whole new journey, isn't it? You're starting at the ascendant. It's a rebirth with Saturn. And it's these houses are the foundations. They are like the building blocks of who you are as an individual, particularly the first 5, 6 houses. So the bottom of the horizon, we are building a new sense of identity and character and self, as it were, when Saturn crosses the ascendant and goes through these houses. So from that point of view, it's kind of awesome, right? Because you're always evolving, we are always individuating, we are always discovering new things about ourselves, and that's what Saturn in the first is as well. It's learning new things about yourself, your abilities, your skills, everything. And then in the second, you're just building the next layer. So I'm kind of gearing more towards an optimistic sort of perspective, but a realistic one, because you always have to be realistic with Saturn, always. So
Yeah, like if I was thinking that now, some of the ambitions and excitements that I would have had to use Saturn in my fifth house transit, I've got to be honest, there's like, well, what can I achieve with the time that's left? like some of the things I can move on into the next transition, maybe, because and so that gives greater security. Like, what's already on the table, like, to be realistic, are you going to eat all of that you put on your plate, basically, is what it comes down to. And sometimes you don't have to eat it all. That's another good thing which I've realized, that you don't have to fill yourself up to the point you're uncomfortable. You can leave things that are on your plate, but what's the most important to eat? What's the most important to clean up, if you will?
that's so funny that you should say that, because can I just bring up your chart very quickly? Is that okay?
Go for it.
Because I was thinking earlier that oh god, this mouse does my head in. You know, the Mars Jupiter, obviously Saturn is going to, form a conjunction to these planets, and I think that's going to be a really, really big deal, in your life, right? But just what you were saying about the plate and, or how much.
How? That's what I want to know. How? Like, why is that? Like, obviously it did it a while ago. I was a young man when that happened last time.
Yeah.
But this is like they're trying to form me up, suit me and boot me. Are they? Like, the world? Hopefully not. Like, it could be that obviously it brings like, obviously I've got my intention and ambitions to bring around these health schools for astrology schools, like, and do yoga with people of all ages, but children obviously being a part of that. And so obviously with Jupiter and Mars, that's very essential. The like Saturn coming in to bring that all together, that would be quite nice. I'd like that to be the case. But also I do think that I've got some health issues that I seriously have to address and take care of, and support myself through clearing as well. And so it could be a process of being with that and watching that I get more and more healthy through the process of that. But also work and supporting myself through work in a way which is, this is fairly cosmic business, which we're doing.
Also, when this happens, it'll be
Yes,
where
the opening square.
and it activates that.
Well, I really started doing this professionally in 2016, kind of thing. I haven't done anything else since then, which was my Saturn return. So
Right.
7 years of I mean, I started studying before then, but like, it's been my work since then.
Right. So, I mean, my understanding is when you have the first quarter square after your Saturn return, it's a bit of a testing field of what you decided and what you began, what you started working on, what you decided on, when you had your Saturn return. But I was just seeing that you've got a T-square with Chiron, Saturn, Jupiter and Mars, and so that T-square is going to be activated as well. Keep that in mind, because that's a really important T-square.
It's bringing all the madness into method. It feels like literally finding, okay, well, there's all of these conscious expressions, and there's all of these logical, astrological, academic bits of information that can be utilized. But let's bring it into the foundation of the body and bring it into the garden of herbology, and let's process it all together, like psychology with the herbology, and like the astrology of how to be conscious and relate to all of these different things in a way which is also kind of exceptionally multidimensional. I think the more that we get into the body, the more that we get organic with health, the more receptive to the consciousness, the more that we purify the body, the more that we're able to stream such wild, miraculous awareness.
Yeah, and you know what? All we have to do for that is just return back to nature. You know,
I
that's
feel like I've always been a bit of a city slicker. The idea of like, oh, a bit of muck on my feet. Oh, go and sit in front of the TV. You know, that's when I was a little kid. I wouldn't get me in the garden. I was sat with the TV. And so it's a massive untangling and getting back into nature process for so many. I feel like I'll always be, as I say, I would like to be able to go and learn about the garden, to see the process of these things developing, to be a witness, to be a contributor. But also it's my nature to be in the city, to be in where they've got all of these different things going on. I feel like I would probably like to spend maybe a small percentage of the time going back to see how these things work in the city and share the gifts of consciousness in those spaces, to bring the medicine to those people and to those places, and then return with the gold back to the alternative gardens where we're cultivating all the astrology and schools and things. My vision.
that's your vision, and you know, that's something that you will work with and develop and dream up more of, and you know, things like that. But when I said that we need to get back to nature, you know, let me just be clear, I don't necessarily mean that we have to abscond the cities and go and live out, you know, in the wild, although that would be great. But for practical purposes, it's just not an option for most people, right? But I guess to be a little bit more specific, by the comment return back to nature, there's just so many simple little things that we could do every single day. Walking on the grass, absorbing the sun's rays, sleeping well at night, sleeping, you know, having a kind of like a intended, focused sort of ritual around that. Perhaps that could be having a bath before you sleep, doing a meditation, doing something really soft, disengaging from the social media, computer technology, all that shit. Just little things like that. Obviously, diet, obviously, what we are allowing to contaminate our field, all of our fields, actually, you know, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, etc. But this is a Virgo craft that needs to be tended to every single day, because if we don't turn it into a Virgo thing, it's very Virgo Pisces, actually. On the one hand, it's surrendering and having faith and trust in the divine process, and bringing in the Virgo quality of actually putting in some discipline in the way you want your day to kind of unfold, as it were. And within that, also know that you can't fucking control everything. In fact, most things we can't control.
But I've had some really good results recently. I lost a lot of weight, and I did yoga almost every day for like the past 6 months, it seems. And I've been even going to the gym and having a guy. I've got Saturn. We just saw Saturn opposite Chiron. I'm having a guy shout at me, telling me to do stuff, and I'm okay with it. And like that's not something which that likes. But when you allow them the authority, it's because we see the benefits in it, right? And allowing someone the authority to bark at us or to tell us what to do, kind of thing. To get that ass down, as that guy says to me sometimes. Like, get that butt down. And so, but it's warranting it's yielding results because it's a daily practice. Just like how doing YouTube videos every day for years and years and years, it becomes like playing an instrument very easy. This is still a challenge for me. Like the yoga is not so much a challenge because I'm doing that for every day for 6 months, but the gym is still a challenge. That's new. But it's really changing like how I feel about myself because I can see the results rendered through day-to-day application. And it's a weight off, not just physically. This is the important thing about body work that they say, but I never really did it. But it actually helps your psychology as well. Helps the mainframe of feeling like, yeah, I can stand up for myself. I'm building a core, like I'm building back muscles, and I'm only just getting started. Really, I'm building just a basic frame. But it's helping me feel like I'm able to be more Saturnian in my own self, to be more Mars, to be the things where actually they're a bit more depleted in my chart, those areas of my sky. And so for me to work on these gives me a lot more vouch for myself. And it would give me a greater container to stand in my truth of who I'm able to be. So that's just my Virgo treats that I've been working on. But like, yeah, like I feel like a lot of these things are like maybe old stories that we might have worked on with Saturn retrograde that might have carried a shadow that maybe felt devaluated because we had externalized power in these areas. And so the combination of the Saturn station direct as Venus meets itself, that's what I like to say. Venus is meeting, although it's making a conjunction, a new synodic cycle for Venus, the Sun, at 29 degrees of Libra. Like for me, it's happening right near my moon. And so it's really about finding my new sense of self and where I can identify with everything by putting old stories to rest. And so for everybody else, like in Libra, wherever it falls for your chart, I feel like it's a reflection. Other people are casting reflections to us where we really weren't able to see ourselves. And yet if we can be open to that and see that there's still changes to make, but yet we've already made so many changes, that means we're able to continue to persevere with things that we're still working on. If we've already accomplished making so many alterations and putting so much to bed. And that's what Venus in the heart of the underworld's about. It's about, I'm not victim. I ain't got Stockholm syndrome. I ain't deluded. I'm right here. And that's it. I've owned it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I notice as well with series, you know, in Sag for you in the second. What do you have some sense of what that speaks to for you?
Grounding the wisdom, which is way up high. From like lofty wisdom, in a sense. It's like bringing in the good stuff with regards to the metaphysical principles of spirituality and stuff like this, because it's in Sagittarius. And it's right. What do you reckon?
No, I agree with what you just said. I was also thinking that it might also speak to, because I've known you for a while now and I'm a pretty good listener. That's part of my skill and talent. And so I really do listen when people speak. I don't just listen to the surface of the words. I listen in a lot of different ways, right? My Venus star point is in Scorpio and I've got a Venus opposite Pluto. Venus is the goddess of listening. The artistry of listening is Venus. So anyway, that being said, one thing that I notice when you communicate is that I feel that there's a lot of value and a lot of importance for you about sharing the philosophical growth and wisdom and understanding, astrologically or otherwise, and that is anchored in the matter of self-worth, being validated, being heard. And you do that in a philosophical way because it's in Sag, right? But she's in the second house, and the second house is what you value including what you value about yourself. And my point is this, that in a lot of what you share, the matter of self-worth comes up a lot, whether you
Mm.
are encouraging others about their self-worth or whether you're acknowledging your own self-worth. It's a theme that I've noticed from the day that I've met you. And I believe that to be Ceres in the second house. So that's all I wanted to say about that.
Yeah, well, in this one as well, like I use whole house science in like a lot of my practice, most of my practice. So you see the second house here has got like it's on the cup, it's got a 12 degrees of Scorpio cusp, and then it's got it's got a little bit of Sagittarius, 11 degrees Sagittarius there. So basically it's that death and endings and the reprise, new beginnings, the rising phoenix. So it's like, okay, well, I know what it's like to be undervalued, but I know it's like to come out the other end too, like, you know. And so it's that whole scoop down and scoop up. It's this whole baptism of being immersed with conflict, if you will, or debt, emotional debt, and then to come out of it with the philosophical principle of being born again.
Yeah.
That's what my messages will get about, I guess. That's my message.
Yeah, and that what you just described is also Venus, Pluto in Scorpio, you know, that conjunction. That's, you know, that's literally what you just described there. And if we use whole sign houses, Ceres moves into the third, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I do use whole sign houses. And when I'm looking at a chart, I'll always look at the quadrant, which is, in this case, this is the quadrant chart. And then I'll look at the whole sign houses, and I'm able to get an understanding of both actually being active and both valuable for any given.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that guy, what I found was interesting was the cusp, because it's like always interesting to go back and look at these cusp numbers. And I know there's a fixed star around there called Alphecca in the constellation of Corona, and it warrants crowns and which is basically awards prestige through hardship, and so that's the cusp of my second house, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very much.
Grace Kelly and Princess Diana had that, and they got crowns for their through hardship.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, so I think we probably need to round it up. So, any final thoughts on?
Yeah, I think that basically because this is happening as we close out a Libra ruled lunar cycle, and we're going to be finding that actually 2 days later we're actually now in between two Mars ruled lunar events, which are the full moon in Aries, the next one's a new moon in Scorpio. So what we're talking about is happening before the new moon. It's imminent, and Saturn stations direct before the new moon, solar eclipse imminent. So it's like whatever's going to be going on between now and then is like if they're doing some wars and things like that externally, then that's going to be something that is going to allow us to recognize, I feel, the similarities and the importance of what's true for us as individuals and what we share with each other. And I think that's a new commerce, that's a new value, that's a reminder of what's really valuable, rather than like maybe things that we thought that was more essential for us and put a price tag on. These things will never have price tags on. In fact, they're pretty much free. It's just getting out of our own prejudices, our own projections, our own pinning a story onto whatever might be seeming to be a fitting canvas. And so we might be a bit more less assumptive. We might be a bit more open to things in this whole Venus cycle. This is a whole new Venus cycle. It will be only 45 days before we see Venus re-emerge in Sagittarius, around the 2nd of December, around then, as an evening star. And so this is very much of things to come. But more imminently, you know, less than 2 weeks from now, Mars stations retrograde, Jupiter's back in Pisces. There's some things that we have to address with this maybe new veneer, if you will, this new lens of observation, which we're able to connect with. And it might be a more mature, a more clear, a more sincere, a more virtuous eye to peer through. And so I feel like this is a time of much change, and particularly if there is any squeezes or any hardship or any lessons, I feel like actually the biggest challenge is all going to be wrapped up before we get to the full moon in Taurus. So it's just getting through the eye of the needle and making those little changes. And if they're alchemical changes, if you think of it like someone who's making little adaptations to the paint. So you're going to get a little bit more yellow there, so I can make it the perfect purple, maybe a tiny bit more red. Just be very slight with the little changes of our inflection and tonology, and we can find that maybe they just lodge wherever we were blocked. It only takes a little bit of just zhuzhing around or dislodging or alchemical changing for things to turn out in a whole different way. I feel like that's interesting.
Actually, yeah. Sometimes it's a very minor thing, as simple as a perspective, right? That can change your reality, as it were, right? But I just wanted to say that Venus will be the evening star on the 22nd of October when she forms the conjunction in Libra, right?
So that's the official turning over, but we won't see it until in December.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I guess people can still think a little bit more about the journey of completion of Saturn in Aquarius, because it's there for a few more months, right? And so we're sort of, nearing the end of that journey now, and perhaps that will be Saturn going direct, for the remainder of the months that it's in Aquarius, is the clear, crystal clear perspective that we have of ourself in community, in society, in what part we play in that, and where we choose and want to choose to put that energy and focus as well, where we feel we may belong, for instance, right?
Yeah, I think that you brought from to me, so I said, well, maybe the old world might be more, well, I can rely on you. That's a bit like outsourcing. Well, where we can flip the script a bit. Where can we make ourselves reliable, not only for ourselves, but we know that other people can rely on us.
The only person you can rely on is yourself.
Yeah. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm saying. But I'm saying let's make that bigger. I know that I can rely on myself for this and for
That's the only
that.
person you can rely on.
But this is what I'm saying. I'm expanding that. Where can we make ourselves so reliable that we're able to be an umbrella for other people in our community? It means that we're not asking to pull on other people, but we know if we're actually reliable. For instance, I'm always going to show up and share astrology. That's what kind of thing we do, you and I. So that means, but if someone over there has devoted themselves to showing up with food, thank goodness that's not my expertise. I know that I can do this and that. I'm not going to depend on this person showing up with the food, but thank goodness they do. You know what I mean? It's a bit more like at the end of the day, we're not able to be experts at everything, but we can be definitely really robust at that thing that we're great at, as well as do all the little bits of everything else that we might need to do for ourselves. But thank goodness this community lark, it's not all about being an island, this Saturn in Aquarius. It's about all of these different individual points of reference, creating a picture of consciousness, creating a whole symbiotic, non-localized, I can get a little bit from everywhere, which contributes to the overall arc of things scenario. I know it's a bit idealist, but we still got the opportunity to see that actually together we are worth more than the sum of our parts. That's the phrase, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, two minds are better than one. There's another one. There's lots of ways of looking at it from that perspective, sure. And from a holistic, bigger picture level, we are stronger united than we are divided. Always, right? There's no question about that.
Unity, evolution is the goal.
Yeah.
Evolution of our consciousness, I would say, though, just to be clear.
Yeah. But again, I mean, with the matter of reliability and so forth, and I hear what you said about feeling like you are putting emphasis and importance on the matter of being reliable in who you are and what you do with others and for others and and so forth. And that's that's a really great quality of conscious intended sort of action of what you want to kind of cultivate and grow, right? For sure. But I think within that, it's always we always have to realize that we can never be unless we are a parent and have an infant and a child, we're really not responsible for anybody else or anybody else's feelings or thoughts or anything of that matter, really.
It's taking a bit of a, it's taking that's a real big alpha statement, isn't it? To be like, wow, bloody hell, I'm going to lay the table for a few people here, like that, as you, because you're quite right. It was a new conception to my at that stage in the moment, but I think it is something to consider. But as you say, first and foremost, it is self, and that's the best message that we can actually reflect to anyone, is the self-love first. Otherwise, it actually is going to eventually, again, be insignificant if you always put in other people first before yourself. That's not a response to love. That's not love in action. That's not
it's a complex thing. It can be control, manipulation, being a victim, martyrhood. You know, it can be a lot of different things. Poor self-esteem, not valuing and worthing your own energy and time and heart, and you know, that can come from the way you were treated when you were a child. That can come from, you know, different experiences in other lifetimes. Wherever you are in that zone, if that is something that has been something that you've had to work through, you know, to become more aware of your own worth, as it were, and realizing that by putting everybody first, it's not going to make you get gold stars and be recognized as this, aha, that's like, you know, that's such a great person as such. There's much deeper implications there, you know. So
I feel like there's just a big lesson that the collective are going through at this stage, and just to kind of on our close, because if we think of the collective archetype as the Pisces archetype, then Jupiter, which rules that sky, has been in the second house of self-worth, in the sign of self, like in Aries, in the second house. And then Jupiter imminently in 2 weeks is going back into Pisces, the first house of I am. Just like Pisces, put yourself first, don't do it for other people. You'll teach everybody else a thing or two by doing it for you. And this isn't just for Pisces, that's for all of us as individuals within the collective. Learn to put yourself first, lead by example, show that we can provide for ourselves, show that we can love ourselves first. And then other people will see that, if they can do it, so can I. Now that's the greatest gift.
yeah, well, it's a mirror. This whole game out there is a mirror. And
Because you're a miracle.
I like that. That's a good.
But we mentioned we're wave formats. Well, yeah, just waving back a mirror, just calling back to remind ourselves and one another this is who we are. And yet we do get sucked into the illusions, the delusions. I've run out of water. Oh my goodness, time's ticking. All these different things that will make us snap out of being conscious and present. But if we can just, you know, bring ourselves back, then we're always able to come back to grace.
Yeah, back to center, right? Back to that crystallized consciousness that is infinite, can never be destroyed, but only change shape, right? And form. And so, no matter how terrible or how scary or how dark something might feel in our life, whether that's for a night or whether that's for years or weeks or months, it does always pass. And also, when I hear things about people's perspectives on nuclear bombs and war and this and that, I've got to be really honest. I really actually don't give a fuck, because if I die, I know where I'm going. I'm just returning back to source.
Oh yeah, I feel like
It's,
I have concerns for people who families are mucked around with it all, because that's a real life thing. But
yeah,
like, and I know that, and I'm not saying that you don't. I'm not saying you don't. But like, if there was just trivia, I don't get scared of these big catastrophes because we're all in it together. And so I think that the big fear about it, and they don't, these people who talk about them, they want to be minimal casualties as well because they've got PlayStation 5s to sell, Amazon to upkeep, and lockdowns to enforce. And they can't lock down anybody if they've all been killed by nuclear bombs. So I think the threat of such a thing is much more powerful than the act of such a thing. Slow moving kind of things that are really kind of yield a lot of trauma rather than actual things in action are much more of a threat and a pressure. It's hypnosis. Like these wars that took place in the last time Uranus was in the position it's in now, the media was much more of a small operation, and so the story was much more contained. You know, these days, these stories, you know, they're not as easy to portray, yet people are so suggestible that this is what that they become the media, and that's the bigger problem which we need to change, because that's not people within their own authority. That's people bowing down and having tapped out and submitted to some small percentage of storytelling, which is actually known as the Pied Piper of the world. And that's what we're doing. You know, we're not calling it crying wolf, we're recognizing ourselves, and we're not having this wool pulled over our eyes. We're not being fleeced.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'd like to say, if it's all right, I've got a 50% almost discount off, almost half price discount off all my astrology readings, which is 1 hour and 2 hour readings,
Awesome.
available until the new moon. So about 10 days or so available for this half price. It's very rare that I do a sale anyway, let alone that whopping discount. If I give you the link for my Calendly, which that renders the opportunity for people to book, if you were able to put that in the description,
Yeah.
I'll do it also because I'll post this video on my channel, and I'll link your channel, of course, as well underneath it as well, for anybody who might be new to your work. I'm sure that you're a familiar face to most of my viewers as well, but I'll still make sure that's the case. And if people want to take advantage of the discount, I'll be very excited to connect with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it would be amazing for people to reach out to you. As I said at the beginning, you're a great astrologer. That's why I often do sit with you. And I think for people to come to you and sit in the space with you for a reading, I think they'll definitely benefit and enjoy it a lot. So yeah, absolutely.
Likewise, anybody who's had readings of me or anything watching this on my channel and they want to come for a reading with you, then I advise that they do that too. Absolutely. It's all about resonance and diversity. Huh?
Mercury Libra as we speak.
Right, aren't we marketing and being generous and courteous with one another? I'm very grateful. This is what it's all about. We're fine examples of a gracious dynamic.
Do you know what? I feel that that when you how can I put this? Source, divine, spirit, consciousness, whatever you want to call it, God, goddess. When your heart is open and helpful, you know, it doesn't go unnoticed, you know. And so the reward is not about, you know, if somebody gave me $10,000 tomorrow or $1 million next year, you know, that's wonderful. Thank you very much for the gift. But the reward of having a deep, deep soul connection to source, and knowing that you are always in that, always a part of that, always held by that, is no price can be ever put on that, right? And so whilst it sounds like I've gone a little bit off track, all I was trying to demonstrate there is that being kind, right, and being loving and being giving is a gift, you know. Being sort of greedy and jealous and, you know, trying to sort of cause harm to people, that just keeps you longer in a human state, which just brings more pain and suffering.
Yeah, I had a session with somebody the other day. Very fortunate to have such brilliant people come for consultation. But like the gentleman said to me, we talk about Christ consciousness specifically, and was talking about some of the things that we touched on earlier. It was really amused me, really inspired me how he was talking. Sometimes I talk like it, but he brought it to me, and I was like, wow. And it's like seeing through the eyes, seeing everybody as I said, this opportunity to multiply, to have compassion, to see ourselves in each other's eyes, is something that we've been trained out of. To see division, to see finite energy, to see that we have to be in this competition, and to be programmed by that is to be actually to disengage from the nature of human muscle, if you will, of the heart, which is a muscle, and funnily enough, it's also like a valve, and it's something which is metaphysical beyond the biological unit itself. It's a whole energy. And so to be open to that as what we're actually practicing deprogramming from a system we're born into. And sometimes in some areas of our lives, it's going to be more easier than others. But I think this grace, this lack of competition, this recognizing the bond between us, this opening, is a continual practice.
It is.
But
Yeah.
as you say, the generosity to give means that we shall receive, but these aren't things we're taught or informed about. And so to experiment with it feels like it's actually wading into wading into fear, wading into areas that we've been programmed to feel inferior about. So we're going to feel fear when we're being generous, because it's not it doesn't feel natural to us, which shows how far we've come as humanities down the road. And so it's for us to bring us back to that and to teach it. And we'll see the results if we're opening up schools with kids, if we're also recognizing the change in ourselves. These kids aren't going to be born of the format if they're coming through the space that we create. And that's the great excitement, if you ask me, about being a gardener, is planting seeds.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they will come through with their own stuff because every soul does, but nevertheless, the
So
future.
there were challenges. They'll be like, you brought us out the system. We want to be in the system. You bastards, take us out the jungle, take us to the city. Like, those kids, they'll teach us good.
In one way, I feel sorry for these young generations, just being born with a computer to their face like this. It's like it's a bit of a tragedy, actually. But anyway, that's another subject. And finally, I was just going to say, relative to giving and heart energy and things like that. I mean, for me personally, when I see somebody smiling because of something I did or said, or the way I looked at them, or whatever it is, that, without sounding sort of cliche, it really does light up my heart. So in other words, what I'm saying is that giving and seeing the joy that it might bring in somebody else, right, is such a celebration inside us. It's something that lights us up. It lights you up, so it makes you lighter, right? As opposed to, when we're being, I suppose, judgmental, right, harsh, bashing someone.
And everyone protective, being protective like this in a way that, oh, I can't be generous, for instance, that kind of protective, that carries a heaviness of doubt and frailty and weight, not like the lightness which you're talking about, like the buoyancy, the abundance. It's like, yeah, the generosity comes with lightness, fairness, courtesy, politeness and beauty, whereas this restriction and tightness, that isn't coming from a place of abundance.
No, it's
And
coming
so,
from here, which is Saturn. Yeah, it's and we all feel that at different times for different
we
reasons.
do that. I play it. Like I'll be honest with you. Like sometimes I'll be like, so like I get a food delivered here, right? And I'll be like, okay, well, I'm learning to give the guys the tip like every time. And as an English person, we weren't trained that way. And so I give more tip, and like I feel the abundance more and more. But it's practicing getting the muscles to do that in the consciousness, to know that actually It's okay. The more that I give, the more that I'm receiving, the more that I give, the more that I'm receiving. It's not about that, but you feel it in the frequency when they receive instantly. And so it feels so much better. It feels so great. But yet, you know, we was coming from, well, I can't, it's my last bit of money. I might need it for that other thing which I get every day, like you know, the newspaper in the morning. What if I can't do that because I didn't give you your tip? You know, silly things like that we get in our own way, right? And it's a reprogramming process because we're abundant. You openly give, you openly receive.
You know, I learned that from my father since I was born, because I was I was so fucking blessed to have the father that I had. I really was just so blessed. That man, I'll never forget. Um, my family aren't wealthy, so it's not like we had a lot of money, right? But my father would feed communities, next door neighbors, and he did this his whole life, right? He was the sort of man that if somebody asked him for $1 and that's all he had left on him, he wouldn't even think twice about it. He would not think twice about it. You know, I remember once saying to him, I made him some prawns, and because he loved prawns, so I made him this Greek dish with prawns, and I was trying to get him off the meat, like the red meat and all of that. And so he had so much wisdom, my dad. You know, it was just like very quiet, very intense, sometimes very chatty and very social, depending on the mood. But anyway, when I said to him one day, you know, eat the prawns, stay off the meat. You know, the meat's it's not that good for you, and you know all those little animals being killed. And you know what he said to me? And he didn't say it to make me feel bad. He just said it because it's the truth and it's wisdom. And he looks at me and he goes, "My sweetheart," he goes, "the prawn has a soul as well, just like the cow, just like the pig, just like whomever." He goes, "But thank you for making it. I'm going to enjoy it. It's delicious." You know, he was God, he had so much wisdom, but he had such a big heart. You know, he would literally, when I'm not exaggerating when I say he would give his last plate of food to the man next door and not eat at all. You know, Venus in Pisces he had as well. So anyway, I learned the lesson from him about giving, you know, and and just trusting, and it's okay, it's all good.
Yeah, and it's a practice, isn't it? Like again, like a valve of generosity. The heart gives, doesn't it? Openly giving consistently, but we don't count on it. We don't question it because it's always giving. So that's another lesson to be open to.
It is. But I mean, it is also important to have boundaries as well. You know, that's really super important in this experience of giving as well, because that the boundaries component brings in the matter of hold,
Installation.
holding value towards yourself, you know, your time, your energy, your heart, you know, whatever it is. You know, it's about taking care of ourselves, so that the more we take care of ourselves, the more we can help others as well, right? It comes back to that kind of thing as well. I mean, it's very complex. This subject, we could talk about it for hours, you know, because there's the spirit of just giving, that the spirit of that free, unconditional giving, and that's at a really different level, you know. And then there's the giving of it could be our time, our whatever it is on a material level. We do what we are giving emotionally, you know. We do have to have some boundaries in place, or we just be wiped out, you know. So that there are
We end up insulting. We can insult ourselves, can't we? If we overgive, we insult ourselves for that in a way sometimes. I think
we what?
we insult ourselves once we've overgiven. We soon know when we should have drawn a boundary because we feel it. But that's our salvation, because we should know not to do it again from that feeling that we get. And that's the lesson.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about this to some extent just a couple of days ago. I talked about transiting Vesta, right? And without going into the complexities of that whole video or whatever, just one thing I want to say to people if they haven't seen that video, or even you, Philip, just in case you've never considered this yourself. But Vesta went direct a few days ago, right? And she's going to finish her journey in Aquarius. She's been conjunct Saturn virtually the whole year because she's been sort of traveling up and down Aquarius, right? And she's going to ingress into Pisces next year, all right? Leave that component of it on the side for a moment. This matter of giving too much, as it were, of our time or whatever it is, Vesta is the body to watch for by transits that shows you when it's time to actually replenish, restore, recenter, rewind, reflect, detach, withdraw from the world, as it were, and restore, replenish, recenter. So when we are pouring and pouring and pouring and pouring and pouring, we eventually find ourselves feeling depleted, and it's Vesta that reminds us you've overdone it. You need to come back to center, replenish. So just observe her movements because she's very significant for that theme of recentering, replenishing, from being.
You've opened a rabbit hole. Like, so I've got Vesta and Aries, and I always find I can get a job done real quick, and I take it. I kind of like, I even give myself like a badge of honor of it. I'll be like, I'm just chilling, listening to music right now, but I'll be there. Don't you worry about it. I'll be there. I'll get that thing done, and I'll do it quick, and it'll be a good job. But like, that's my Vesta and Aries. But the fun thing is, what I'm going to ask you, and if it's too big a question, it's too big a question. But I have
to end
the
that.
last thing I say. I've got a cardinal square from my Vesta to my Juno in Capricorn, almost exact. And so, from what you just said, like Juno is the archetype of the wife, right? And so, and it's in my fourth house. It's interesting that.
So are you asking a question about Juno and Vesta being square each other and what that kind of might mean? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, just out of intrigue, what you would like to say about it, because it could be a reflection of two things, and my assumption, and I'd love to hear your perspective, and that is that it's like, it could be my expectations about what I would expect the ideal wife to fulfill and be in my experience, or maybe it's the role that I play as that kind of doting figure for myself or for others in my work or in my life.
All right, can I answer the question? Because I've got to go.
Yeah, tell me.
All right, so just a couple of things first before I just make a couple of comments about the square. First of all, I would read that more so as the Sun, Neptune, Juno, right? That little combo there is a very powerful combo. There's a lot to say about that to begin with. So when I'm looking at that square between Juno and Vesta, I will be also bringing in the Neptune and the Sun. That's just something I wanted to highlight to begin with. But just to answer a simple, basic delineation of Juno square Vesta in those particular signs, especially, I mean, it would in some. There's a lot of things we could say about this, but in some ways, it would speak to the sense of duty and obligation that you might feel in partnerships and relationships, whether they are personal or professional, and how that can at times conflict with your own sense of doing your own thing, being independent, being free, and investing time in yourself, and feeling the constant sort of pull and weight of the Capricorn sort of archetype saying, no, you've got to do this and you've got to do that and blah, blah, blah.
That's not a nice feeling. It's not a nice feeling, that.
No, it would be very challenging. Yeah. I mean, Vesta in Aries is investing in herself, in her autonomy.
I could get that actually myself as well. Like, for instance, before I was like, I'm gonna go cycle to town and do these things for me, like get some food. But then I was like, but I've just got to do this. I've just got to finish posting on Instagram. I've got to do these things before I can go. And it's a bit like this in a way. It's not for another, it's for my love of work. But sometimes it is for a lover or something else, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can see that there would be some tension at times with that, component internally. Yeah. All right, I have to go. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Philip, for
I
sharing.
appreciate that. And thank you everybody for watching our chit chat churning out, because it's really fun to be able
Oh,
to connect with you.
it's a marathon.
Yeah, we explored highs, lows, deeps, everything in between, and the center.
Yeah. Yes, yes. And whew, I just need to go to the
Decompress.
gym now. Go to the gym and use a different part of my energy, different focus. But this was awesome, and I think lots of people will appreciate it and will definitely benefit in lots of different ways. We both have, I mean, we're both in, two different souls. We have a very sort of specific orientation to our understanding of astrology, but in unison together, we find a way for it to connect and inspire and bring up new questions or new thoughts or new understandings, whatever it is, right? And so that in collaboration just gives birth, right, to new awareness, new desires, new discoveries. And that's why we're here, right? To bring that to ourselves and to others. And so I think we've done that in some kind of way today. And
Exciting and a joy. We live to our word. We're of our word, because we said we would do this 5 months ago. Or was it 9 months ago when we did the vote, or was it 5 months ago? Either way, we said we were going to do it.
About 5, yeah, about 5.5. And we did say, and we've done a Saturn thing. We've honoured Saturn, haven't we? And
Well,
so,
maybe we can have some good Saturnian manifestations come in our favour for that now.
yeah, that would be a nice little bonus on the side for sure. Okay,
Unite ourselves.
together again though, Philip. I don't know when, and I'm not sure what we'll talk about, but you and I can work that out at a later stage. But we can definitely.
Maybe it would be the ingress, if we're sticking with Saturn, into Pisces. We shall see. We'll come into the new year and see about what we can connect with.
Actually, yeah, that could be a good move. Yeah, we'll reflect on that. Okay, well, I'm gonna stop the recording here, and
Thank you, you guys. Cheerio for now. See you again soon.
yeah, see you all soon. Thanks, guys, for watching. Much love and much star blessings to all of you. Thanks and bye.